Welcome, everyone. We are really excited to have you join us for today's conference and specifically for this session where we're going to talk about how we can innovate together through leveraging generational strengths. My name is Judine Preddy, and I am the director of the Strategic Enablement Team within Co-op and Experiential Education. And I'd like to pass things over to my colleague, Dave, to introduce himself.
Thanks, Judine. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name is Dave Jury. I'm the Associate Director of the Work Learn Institute. And in just a few moments, we are really thankful to have and to introduce you to Anne-Marie Weber, who's the Supervisor, Contracts and Services at the at the region of Waterloo. More on that in a minute, but back to you, Judine.
Thanks, Dave. So before we dive into the research and the examples that we're going to share with you today, I would like to set the stage and talk about a number of factors that are affecting all of us, possibly in multiple areas of our lives. Nora referenced in her opening comments the concept of a VUCA world. The letters stand for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It's an acronym that seems to have been introduced around the year 2000, and since 2010, it has risen in its use. It's something that I suspect is easy for all of us to relate to when we think about the variety of challenges, big and small, facing governments, our companies, our communities, and each of us as individuals. So while I won't go into a great deal of detail here in the 4 factors that you can see listed on the slide, I am hoping that as you hear our presentation today, you're able to see how each of these areas are contributing to a VUCA world. I'm also hoping that as we share this presentation with you, you can see how hiring co-op students can help future-proof your organizations in the midst of these uncertain times. I will specifically call out the issue of Canadian productivity declines, something that you may have seen in the news headlines. I'm not an economist, but I am really interested in the conversation and data in this area. The Royal Bank of Canada, RBC, published a report recently that examined the issue of productivity decline in Canada and the connection to the post-secondary sector specifically. Usually, there's a direct connection between the levels of productivity and the levels of education within a country. However, Canada has one of the highest levels of post-secondary attainment in the world, and yet is lagging on the measure of economic productivity. I'll put the link to the report in the chat, but one of the key takeaways in the report that's relevant for our conversation today is that the report suggests that work-integrated learning, programs like Co-op, are an important strategy as part of the solution. I've taken the findings in that report to mean that as post-secondary institutions, we need to find the most effective ways to, 1, ensure that we're preparing students to hit the ground running in an ever-evolving labor market, and 2, that we're finding ways to support companies and organizations in hiring those students and providing experiences such that both the organization and the students benefit. So today's event is part of our work in that area, but it's also the focus of our work within the Co-op and Experiential Education Department at Waterloo every day, all year round. So before I ask Anne-Marie to describe how her department at the region has designed co-op roles to set the stage for innovation, I wanted to highlight a few areas of research that if you've attended our sessions before, you may have heard about some of this. The first relates to research in the area of the impact of co-op students on the dynamic of a team. If you have hired students in the past or currently hire students, I'd ask if you could take a moment to think about how the presence of the students affect the day-to-day operation of your team. Research that we've done suggests that separate from the work the student does, their creativity, fresh perspectives, and enthusiasm can really be a contagious effect and boost your team's morale. Their presence can help with the development of mentorship and supervisory skills in existing team members. And there's also something really interesting about the need to walk a newcomer through various routines and processes that can help shine a light on how things might be done differently. Another area of research, which is not research I've conducted myself, but rather colleagues at the Youth Innovation Project at Waterloo have conducted, has to do with neuroscience and the brain development stage of your typical 18 to 24-year-olds. The research shows that at that age, the human brain is still malleable and, in fact, is primed for learning and innovation. And this takes me to the third point. The students coming up with new ideas is not in and of itself what's going to lead to innovation within your organization. The magic really comes from tapping into the vast generational experience that exists within your organization. What others have within the organizations that students may not have is an understanding of how things actually work and get done, and a broader systems perspective. Combining the strengths of what different generations bring to the table means that new ideas can be scalable and sustainable within your organizations. But of course, all of this doesn't happen without intention and without an investment of time and planning to set the student and the team they're working with up for success. So now I'd like to pose a question to Anne-Marie to highlight the ways the region thinks about how they engage co-op students in a strategic and intentional way. Anne-Marie?
Thanks, Judine. So at the Region of Waterloo, within waste management, we aim to deliver a positive experience for the students, providing meaningful work opportunities and growth opportunities for them. During the work terms, the students are part of teams, and those teams help guide the projects that the students will be working with. Those projects the students get to see from the beginning straight through till the end, and they're provided with a lot of flexibility on how to accomplish those tasks, but they see the fact that those projects they're working on, we are going to use that information to guide our current practices and our future practices. So a few years ago, we had some students working on preparing information for our upcoming cart-based system, which we are moving towards in March 2026. And the students were helping do a lot of the background work to help guide our rollout, which we're starting to work on. Other tasks, we had a previous co-op student, her name was Avery. She came into our organization and really all she wanted to do was learn as much as possible about waste. It was an amazing partnership with her. She was assigned an organics contamination project where she would go out and monitor truckloads of organic material coming from residential areas. She would look at that material to see what types of contamination we had. Where did that contamination come from? Was it something that the driver or the collector could have removed prior to collecting that? Was it something to do with the truck? But then also took it a step further to say, where was that truck coming from? What residential area? And then how can we make changes to our contractor training to make improvements to reduce that contamination? And then also look at increasing our education with certain areas within the region where we think that material is coming from as well. So we look at what a co-op student is wanting to get out of their work term and try to assign projects so that they can achieve those goals that they have coming in. So it's a dynamic. We need to look at what the student wants to get out of their co-op term and what we have to offer and how can we synergistically work together to accomplish both things.
Amazing. Amazing. Thanks, Anne-Marie. I think some of these themes will come back to when we hear from Dave about some of the values of Gen Z and how we can leverage those in support of the work of organizations.
I was thinking the same thing, and I promised to the audience we did not practice that, but Anne-Marie, when you're talking about what students want, I thought in the next few minutes, as I'm speaking about Gen Z work values, you'll get to hear a little bit more information based on the research about the response to that question. What is it that students are looking for? And not necessarily co-op or internship students, but really just young people today, students, individuals who are going through a school to work transition and entering the workforce. So today's conversation is about intergenerational collaboration. And as part of that conversation, I want to focus my contribution today to Gen Z, the youngest generation in today's workforce, who surprisingly already make up about 25% of everyone across the globe who is working. You've probably seen media stories highlighting conflict between that generation and older generations. Maybe you have a personal experience with that. And there still seems to be some real confusion about how to attract, work with, and support younger people to your organization. So my goal today is to clear up some of that confusion and, using some real world examples, offer some ideas for how we can create stronger opportunities for collaboration. And what I'm specifically doing is drawing on the research about the concept of work values, which refer to core beliefs that people have about what matters most in their job. So things like achievement or autonomy or collaboration or perhaps stability. The work values that individuals have shape how we behave at work, the careers we choose, and how satisfied we feel in a given job. For example, if somebody values collaboration, they'll probably thrive in team environments, not isolated ones. So that's kind of like a simple way in which this kind of idea matters. And I guess the big picture here is, if organizations can design experiences that align with Gen Z values, they'll build a workforce that's more motivated, more collaborative, and better equipped for long-term success. So what do we know about Gen Z values today? Well, there's about a decade of research now, including studies from my colleague and I at the WorkLearn Institute, that show some pretty clear patterns. And that's what I'm going to hopefully illuminate today. So you can see on the slide here, we've got 4 things that I want to highlight for you. The first is flexibility. What we've learned is that work-life balance is key, and it's probably the single strongest work value among Gen Z. They grew up during a global pandemic and saw that work doesn't have to be rigid. There's other ways of doing work that we hadn't considered in previous years. They really value remote, hybrid, and asynchronous work, and they expect trust rather than micromanagement. Requests for flexible work hours aren't uncommon, and they're really trying to prioritize things like mental health days. And that's not about being lazy. It's not about being work averse. Really, it's about creating a relationship with work that's sustainable, that doesn't lead to inevitable burnout, which is what they witnessed in generations before them. The second key work value is growth. Gen Z seems really hungry to develop both professionally and personally. They are really keen to seek feedback, mentorship, and learning opportunities. We just heard about a student working with Anne-Marie who clearly embodies that. A real conversation with a supervisor can be as powerful as formal training. And what we've learned is that for Gen Z, a job is a stepping stone to becoming a better person, not just a better, more capable professional, but a more complete person. The third work value is purpose. Gen Z really wants meaningful work. They ask questions like, what does this company stand for? How does my work matter? Mission statements, things that kind of just get put on paper and then collect dust on the shelf, those don't seem to be enough anymore. This generation really expects to see values in action every day. And last is authenticity. Gen Z really values being real, and they expect the same of their employers. They want to show up fully as themselves without fear of judgment, and they want leaders who communicate honesty, who live their values, and admit their mistakes if something goes wrong. When something feels fake, when something feels disingenuous, they really notice and they disengage. And I actually think that's where some of the media latches onto when we see things like quiet quitting or ghosting. I don't think it's about disloyalty or low levels of commitment. I think it's about Gen Z saying, this place is inconsistent with my values. I don't think I can have a relationship with this employer anymore. I have to look somewhere else. So those are 4 kind of takeaways about, in very general terms, what Gen Z values. But on the next slide, what I want to do is offer a couple real world examples that we've seen from employers in the Waterloo ecosystem who clearly have latched onto these concepts and have developed policies or strategies to deliver them to this younger generation. So what does this really look like? Well, here's a couple things to think about. First, consider Nova, a mid-sized tech firm who adopted a results-based work model even before the pandemic and have continued to do that in more recent years, where employees set up their own schedules and remote work is the default. Managers are trained to support flexibility proactively, not reactively. And this approach, according to Nova, led to higher Gen Z retention and stronger collaboration across generations. So there's clearly some opportunity there to make things the default rather than something else. And Nova seems to be doing a great job creating flexible work arrangements for their younger workers. Omnium, a global logistics company, puts early career talent at the center of business strategy, where co-op students and new grads contribute directly to major projects, not just support tasks. And you heard Anne-Marie talk about how that seems to be consistent with their approach at the region too. Regular mentorship ensures that they're growing while making real contributions. And apparently many stay on full-time after graduation, which I know is a big reason why so many employers participate in work integrated learning programs in the first place. Another example, Coas Health, a healthcare tech firm, champions growth. That's kind of like a big thing for them. For example, a Waterloo student was trusted to lead a pilot of their new AI chatbot project, which was a really major initiative. And the organization encouraged the student to stretch beyond her existing skills, which is exactly the kind of opportunity that Gen Z values. The student I'm referring to is named Kennedy, who led the pilot.
We never know.
She'll actually be speaking in the closing panel. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that, make sure to stick around and you'll hear more. And last, Sienna, an organization that we've featured through the Work Learn Institute in some previous speaking engagements, a global networking systems company, models authentic inclusion. From day one, everyone who joins the organization, including their co-op and internship students, are invited into employee resource groups and have channels to give feedback and shape the workplace. And Sienna really seems to embody that the cultural values that employees have around being their authentic selves. And they've really championed that and made space for it. And there's been some really positive response from younger workers about that. So I know that this is really high level stuff. We're just touching the tip of the iceberg, but I would have to say that my key takeaway point here is understanding Gen Z values like flexibility, growth, purpose, authenticity is key to building stronger intergenerational collaboration. And I don't want you to think that it's all about changing everything that you do to cater or pander to the younger generation. I actually don't think that's what I'm saying here. I think we need to think about fostering mutual respect and creating a shared purpose across all ages. And I think that's how we move from confusion to collaboration and create a stronger future for everyone involved. So that's all I have for you now. I want to ask Anne-Marie a question about how do you think that we can leverage some of these student traits to boost productivity and innovation in your work that you do at the region of Waterloo?
So I would say it's really important to ensure that you're providing meaningful work to your co-op students. We try to do that the best we can. One instance at the region, we currently have 2 co-op students, Jack and Chloe. They're responsible for providing landfill tours. It was time for us to update our scripting and wording for different age groups that come through on landfill tours. So why not utilize those 2 staff that are going to be providing that service and give them the opportunity to update a script that suits them. They have some fresh new ideas to make sure that the material is age appropriate, and it allows them to be successful when they are performing their job. Other things that we do at the region, we provide a resume review with our students to help them for future work terms, helping set them up for after graduation, and they're out in the workforce applying for those first jobs after graduation. We try to work on doing some mock interviews and providing feedback on those interviews for those positions that the students are really interested in, whether that's something within waste management or even within the region of Waterloo. Can we leverage some of our contacts within the organization to set up a mentorship, to set up a connection for that student, to help them engage and be ready for that future? It's amazing. It's amazing to see, you know, as much as you connect with those students, listen to what they have to bring to the table, and see how you can best support them. It's great.
Yeah, I know. What a concept, right? I feel like there's such mutual benefit too, because in having those conversations, like in a mock interview format, you're probably learning more about them. Maybe it's a new forum for them to share or showcase why they might be a good fit for the region.
Absolutely. And we have hired so many previous co-op students that it's a great opportunity. And having, as a supervisor, having those mock interviews, it also allows me to reflect on the posting that we post. Is there something that we're missing? Do we need to see about making a tweak or a change that will help us attract a different demographic of student? Is there something we're missing? Are we lacking something? And how can we leverage our organization to get the best of the best?
Doesn't that remind you, Judine, of some of the stuff you're saying earlier? Like the idea of hiring a student can change the dynamic of the team, like causing that reflection to say, is this the most, is this the best way of attracting new talent? So I'm seeing a lot of connections there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate that. Back to you, Judine.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Yes, I took so much, Anne-Marie, from your examples and your experience at the region. I know how valuable students find those particular experiences and how valuable it is for them to feel some ownership in the projects that they're taking on, and for them to get to a place where they get to see the impact and the outcomes of the work they've contributed. And I love, from an organizational perspective, the idea of how you're identifying potential talent for later on, how you're promoting waste management as a really exciting career for students. And I know there are specific students who may not have thought that was going to be their career path, and as a result of their work term experiences found a passion. Back to Mark Chapuski's comments at the start of today's session. So I'm so grateful for your work, Anne-Marie, and the work of all our co-op employers in finding ways to engage students in such meaningful ways. So I think as we wrap up the session for today, I wanted to preview some very recent research that we've been doing. And the work has been centered around how can we identify what the key elements are for intergenerational work to spark the kind of innovation that we've been talking about today, to help build those change makers, whether those are the upcoming generation or change makers within your organizations. I'd also like to make the distinction between multi-generational and intergenerational. We all work in multi-generational workplaces, but there are fewer examples of intentionality around how to bring those generations together to build on their collective strengths. And this is really consistent with the Gen Z values piece. In studying the dynamics of intergenerational collaboration, these are the 4 pillars that we're finding contribute to success. It's a preview of a paper that is currently under review that will be published in the coming months. The 4 pillars are finding and uniting around a common purpose. So if you think about bringing different generations together, hopefully you can find the thread that creates that meaning and purpose for all the participants. Spending time and investing in building meaningful connections, the idea being that not just throwing people together, but how do you have them discover things that they have in common, and feel and build trust between one another. Third, striving to equalize power. So this is an important element of intergenerational collaboration. Age and role tend to imply a certain level of imbalance in power. And for intergenerational collaboration to be effective, it's important to equalize that power dynamic as much as possible so that all ideas, all questions can come to the table. And lastly, it's important to embrace a range of perspectives. What's important about what's come before, the current state that we're in, and a respect towards how decisions we're making today affect the future. This is an area of emerging research for us. So if it's something that piques your interest as far as how this applies in workplaces, please reach out to us. And so with that, I'd like to wrap up our session with a suggestion to those of you who are joining us today to think about how you might more intentionally bring generations together, really to focus on leveraging their strengths. How might you design roles for co-op students that consider both what your organization needs and what might ignite creativity, commitment, and motivation in a Gen Z student? That's how the win-win can be achieved. And as this slide suggests, it can be communicated through various stages of the recruitment and onboarding process. The other comment I want to leave you with is about how important it is to be clear and explicit about what you're asking students to bring to the table. As Anne-Marie has said, letting them know that you want them to share their ideas and giving them space within an existing project scope to know where they can bring their creativity is really a key to their success and the success for your team and your organization. And so with that, we will dive into some questions. As was noted earlier, if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A and I will ask the questions and then get Dave and Anne-Marie to help me answer them. So the first question I see here is, hello, I'm an office manager with a law firm and we have a business casual dress code. Especially for when we have in-person client meetings. While we're a millennial-led firm and we work with Gen Z students, we respect their values, but it seems like the presentation is saying that Gen Z are our customers and we're trying to cater them like we would marketing personas. This is just some important feedback. Gen Z working with millennials is productive and possible as long as they feel included and important. We wish millennials were regarded with so much candor and attention as Gen Z are. So it's a really interesting comment. And I think Dave said in his that I don't think this is necessarily a matter of a directive or even a suggestion to change the dynamics. If the dynamics of your organization are a particular dress code because of client-facing workplaces, I think it's absolutely important to stick with that and to explain to the Gen Z students what that culture is all about and why that's important to you and the success of your organization. The other thing that I'll note is that I have been doing this for a little while and I am aging myself, but I am not part of millennial or Gen Z. And in fact, we were doing research like this when our co-op students were millennial students. So it's been interesting for me to see the shifts. Some of them are subtle, some of them are more extreme, but I think sometimes I think we're talking more about the 18 to 24-year-old age group than we are necessarily talking about the specific label of a generational difference. Dave or Anne-Marie, I'm happy to throw it over to either of you if you have anything to add to that.
I would love to hear Anne-Marie's thoughts on this as a supervisor working across generations. I totally take the question very legitimately that there's a bit of like a kids these days phenomena. Don't they, like, do we really just have to give them everything they want? I hope that's not the takeaway here. I think the message is that to compete in a global market for talent, we have to consider the offering, right? The whole compensation and other factors package. Money is one thing, but then there's like the experience of working within an organization. And you can cleverly design experiences that are more versus less appealing. And understanding the things that people value and then offering roles and social interactions that are consistent with those values, I think is an important thing. I don't think it's about just giving everyone what they want all the time, but thinking about strategic opportunities to nudge the organization in ways that makes them more appealing so you can compete for the best talent, I think is hopefully the takeaway. But Anne-Marie, I'd love to hear how that resonates with you.
Yeah, so I think everybody within an organization is unique and you have to bring everybody's perspective together. And there are going to be clear boundaries that you can't flex. For example, dress codes. If you're a law firm and you have client meetings, obviously the organization wants to present themselves in a certain way. That may be a non-negotiable within that organization. But then you have to look at other things that are within your organization that you can give a little leverage. So what are the priorities and how can you adapt to attract the best talent? And, you know, organizations are the best when they have multi-generations working together, because each generation brings a unique set of ideas and knowledge and information to the table to help share and collaborate with one another.
Completely agree. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Thanks, Dave. We have another question. Our mature employees really struggle with technology and online meetings just aren't as effective. What can we do to keep everyone happy and productive without having online meetings? So I think this, and there's another one here about I can't offer hybrid work. What can I do to attract top talent? I think Anne-Marie's comment about everyone has unique preferences, everyone is driven by different motivations. We've shared with you some overall generational trends, but I think it's important to know that that's part of what the screening and the get to know the student through the application process is all about. If you can present the opportunity that you have to the students through a job posting, the student is then picking up information from that and making an assessment about whether that's the kind of place they can see themselves working in and being successful. And then they have the opportunity in the interview, if you select them for an interview, to tell you that to ask one another questions about what kinds of working environments are going to make the best fit. And so I think that's, to me, in hiring co-op students for more than 20 years, that's been the key to success there, is finding the match. And we're fortunate to support such a large program at Waterloo that we have thousands of students. And so the opportunity to find a student that is going to thrive in your organization, the way Anne-Marie has described the students they've hired, is really a much higher probability because of that communication channel that happens during the screening process. Dave or Anne-Marie, anything you would like to add to that?
No, I would agree. It's more than just that hybrid option. Some students totally prefer to be in the office the normal 5 days a week. They enjoy those interactions with other staff and the learning opportunities that they have when they're in the office versus working independently at home on a project. As for having various team members who maybe are not as tech savvy as others, typically at the region, we try to offer in-person hybrid meetings to accommodate everybody. We understand at the region, we have some people working on a hybrid work model, and we have 2 anchor days, and we have others that, you know, they choose to do something different. They may be in the office every day. So when we're purposefully setting up those meetings, we're trying our best to set them up as a hybrid model so that we can, you know, accommodate everybody's needs.
I think that's it makes it more of a puzzle to solve, I think, for organizations, but I think the investment of time in planning and thinking about how the different types of work get done most effectively is a really good investment of time.
Absolutely. And I want to just add one other piece, that students are very tech savvy. And sometimes if you pair that individual in your work organization that isn't very tech savvy, that student can then be a teacher and a mentor for another individual or a more senior staff member. And it's kind of a win-win situation. So sometimes that is a benefit too.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Beautiful example of tapping into potentially generational or skills-based differences. I really like this question. How do you recommend employers balance autonomy and structured guidance when working with co-op students who might be new to professional settings? I think this is something that many employers struggle with. I think when I think of the research that we've done and various employers and students that I've interviewed over the past, I think it's something that once employers gain some experience with, they really get a handle on. The examples that I've seen are, I'll give two examples. So one, having an early task that's sort of a standard type of thing that the student does within the first week or two of being in the organization that might be a little bit more structured, but it gives you insight into where the student's at from a developmental perspective. So if you give them something where, research this topic and come back by the end of the week with a presentation on it, you will get a good sense of where that student is at, how much guidance they're going to need, and can find the balance between that autonomy and structured guidance in a really effective. I've seen it in healthcare, I've seen it in manufacturing, and it's been a very effective strategy for, especially for students who are new to professional setting, because some of them hardly need anything, and some of them need a bit more structure. The other thing, and I think Anne-Marie referenced this a little bit, is if you have multiple students, the opportunity to have senior students supporting junior students can be another strategy that sort of limits the pressure on the day-to-day supervisor, but gives a bit more context and help to the more junior student, and a place for them to ask questions that they might feel a little bit more comfortable in asking questions. So I'm happy to Anne-Marie, Dave, anything you'd like to add to that particular question?
I love both of those examples. I think I might just add one thing based on a study that my colleagues and I just published in the last few weeks, which is I always thought that there would be this impingement on autonomy, that we should kind of like let students do their own thing. But I'm now starting to realize the data show they want a little bit more guidance, especially like Judine is saying early on in the process, that check-ins, constructive feedback, these are the things that they're actually asking for more of from their supervisors. And so you can kind of think about it like a slope, where maybe at the beginning of the work term, the students want lots of interaction, lots of feedback, lots of check-ins. And then once the organization is satisfied they're on the right track, then things can kind of die down a little bit.
And I would say also to have informal check-ins, just a little coffee chat. How are things going? Is there anything that you need from me? How can I support you with the work that you're doing? It doesn't have to be anything formal where you're booking a meeting, you're sitting down in the boardroom together, having those, formal conversations for a review. They can be informal. And the more informal conversations that you have with those co-op students, the more comfortable they feel with approaching you when they do have a question or a concern. And always try to be willing to take that time to answer their questions. Or if you don't understand or have the answer for that question, it's okay to say, I'm not sure how to answer that. I think we should go talk to Dave down in the office, 3 doors down. He would be a better person to answer that question. And by showing that maybe you don't know all of the answers, that also helps to engage that student and know that you're not that perfectionist, and it's okay to go approach other people for help.
That's such a good point, Anne-Marie. I think of that all the time in the students that I've worked with. How do we create that? And in the research that Dave and I did right at the early stages of COVID, we found that was an area when students went and worked fully remotely, it was easy for them to be forgotten. Whereas when they were in an office and people were walking by their desk, it was easy to just check in. Is everything okay? Oh, they look like they don't have enough to do. Let's give them some more work to do. So I think that's an added complexity with hybrid and online work, that sort of, how do you set up those informal check-ins? Okay, I am seeing the time, and I see great questions in the chat that we aren't going to have time to get to, but please do include anything in your, this is the way you can reach out to us. We appreciate the support of joining us today, as well as, of course, hiring our co-op students. Any information that you'd like from us, please reach out. Thanks again for joining us. And a big thanks to Anne-Marie and Dave for joining me today.